I am so glad that you found my YouTube channel. My name is Tracey Martin, and I am an immersive transformational life coach with more than 30 years of experience. I am a licensed brain health trainer with Dr. Daniel Amen, a published author, a speaker, a radio show host for Raising Greatness on Faith Talk 1360, and my own podcast on TLM Nation, where you can find it on iTunes and Spotify. The work that we do is holistic, and we know that people are seeking and searching for more, whether it's working with Gen Z, their parents, the business owners that hire them, or individuals themselves. We have an opportunity to do better and to do different in this world. And do we really know what that is and where that comes from? We dive into 4 areas of life: psychologically, biologically, socially, and spiritually. We want a holistically healed and healthy person. It's the only way that we create a better generation and better generation of parents for who's coming next. Hello, welcome back to TLM Nation. It is me, and I am solo. I wanted today I wanted to share a story with you all about my journey through food, through nutrition, through health and well-being, just one bucket of it. And then I'm going to share more as we go through this season of podcasting. So this journey, this conversation today is about I am a recovering vegan. And I say that with loud and proud because that was a journey for our family that we all embarked on, by the way. My husband was not fully on board with it, maybe one day a week, but my daughters and I really felt like it was something that we wanted to do. It was an area of nutrition that we had not necessarily dove into. I had a lot of clients who have gone back and forth with this vegan, vegetarian, all these different labels, which I am not a fan of labels. Let's just get that off from the get-go. I am not a fan of labels. I believe that you must get your blood work done, understand your body, and design your food accordingly. But I wanted to check it out. I wanted to know more about it. And if there was the best way of being a vegan, we did that. We did the B12 injections. We made sure of our protocol, of our nutrition, of our supplementation. We did everything right, if there is such a way to do that. And this conversation can take one of 2 ways. So if you are choosing to be vegan because of an emotional conversation within yourself, that's a tough one to debate and to grow through because, yes, we have love of animals and we have love of our world, and that's the driver. If it is for health and well-being, I would encourage you to get your blood work done, run other kinds of tests to know your starting point and where you're going with this and why you're doing this. And then we have the ethical conversation as well, which that can go one of 2 ways as well, depending upon the conversation in the world around deforestation, climate control, emissions, all this stuff, as we know. So I just want to share this little blip of our story. It was quite a few years ago. My daughter had really jumped into factory farming and animals. I was getting ready to write a book on sustainable living and as it pertains to fashion, and I dove into skincare, health and well-being, factory farming, all of it, nutrition. And so we started having these conversations and really started jumping into the truth of factory farming. Most of these animals are on feedlots. They're in confined pens. They're fed antibiotics because of this, because they're in such close quarters and confinement with other animals. They are pumped full of growth hormone and things to expedite the growth of the animal. And a lot of times, you don't know what they're actually eating. There's GMO corn, the feed, all of this, right? And then it plays out into the deforestation of more grazing land and the growth of all so not only are we growing the grain, now we're feeding the animal. It's this whole entire chain that's been built that we have to question. So we dove into it. I did my blood work throughout my time as a vegan. And at first, in the very beginning, felt great. I believe there were benefits to it for sure. And then over time, you just kind of had that certain look of just not necessarily being healthy. And I go back and look at images and we can track it that way, which is great. But if you are choosing to do any kind of a nutritional plan that the world says is trending, I just invite you to really see how it is with you personally. And so I tracked it. I have hypothyroid in any way, so it definitely wasn't good on my thyroid because it has a higher level of carbohydrates, and the proteins typically are not a complete protein. So there's all these different things to think about, right? And so then we had these conversations which were mostly emotionally charged. And I think if you are going to have this conversation, you have to be honest with yourself. I hated to see what was happening and with the animals and the truth about it. And there's numerous documentaries you can watch. I encouraged my daughter to not watch the documentary Earthling. And about 2:00 in the morning, I hear sobbing. I woke up to her sobbing and I said, "You watched it, didn't you?" And she admitted to, "Yes, I did." And so then we had this conversation of how could humans do this to animals, and just the way this is done from the dairy industry to the meat industry to even, pork and turkeys and all these different things, what happens versus the regenerative part of our world of meat and the meat industry and ranching. And I don't think people necessarily understand that. So when I got into the message of sustainability as it pertains to food and nutrition in the world around us, sustainability is regenerative, which means you have to look at the alternative to what the world is telling you to do, which is going down the path of factory farming and, this mass consumption. And let's face it, nobody needs a 30-ounce porterhouse steak on their plate. You don't need it. And that's part of the conversation that nobody wants to have, which is the gluttonous behaviors and the consumerisms of that and what that leads to. Heart disease, diabetes. Those are the conversations that nobody wants to have because they'd rather blame a specific or demonize a specific thing such as red meat or whatever that is. And you know what? We all got to run down these paths. And that's what I want. That's really what this podcast is about telling you that if you're curious about something, shut down the trends, because let's face it, nobody even knew what an avocado was a few years ago until the powers that be said, let's start avocados. They got government subsidies to the farmers, and now everyone wants avocado toast for breakfast. That's what happens to these trends. They're always driven by the government lobbyists and government subsidies, but people don't jump down there because we're too focused on the next greatest best trend. Same thing with kale. Kale used to actually be a garnishment around a salad bar, and now all of a sudden it's in every single thing that we eat. The problem is, again, it's got a lot of oxalates in it, which can mess with your gut. So when we dove down this particular path of being a vegan, it was really emotionally driven for the love of animals. And then you start to look at, well, are you paying a price with your health? And I know there is vegans out there that will say, well, I would rather not be as healthy as I can just to save an animal. My argument with that is that you're actually debilitating yourself from being a steward of your world, what's your conversation around that? For me, the best that I can be, the better that I am, the more things that I can do in the world for the betterment of the world and stewarding what we've been given. So lots of school on thoughts on this. And I don't want you to start to get down this rabbit hole. And we get so far off the mark when we talk about this because it's so emotionally charged. But you have to look at the truth. Billions of animals are killed in factory farming. Billions of animals are killed whenever you want to have a plant-based diet as well. And if you don't look at that, and by the way, all these statistics are on the World Health Organization. If you're a fan of the WHO, I'm not. However, it's funny how all this stuff is out there. And I'll put some links in here at the end of the show that you can go down the path yourself and check it out. But we started down this path of being a vegan. And to be honest with you, like I said, I felt good in the very beginning. Plus, I think I felt good because I thought I was doing something virtuous. So I want to say, was it health? Was it emotional? You kind of got to figure that out. And then I started to track things with my blood and with my naturopathic doc. And I noticed that my hair was not growing as well. I had issues with my teeth and my gums. These things were playing out over time. And that's what I want to address, is that there are things happening within your body if you don't do things that your body needs. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? But we're so hyper-focused and fixated on societal's conversations around these foods and these particular types of eating. And I feel really good doing this. I'm doing something good for my world. And then you have the virtue signaling with that. And when you run that down and you run it parallel to how do I feel? What am I doing right in the world? What do I want to be a part of? You have all these multitude of questions. So for our family, we dove into it right. We did everything right. We made sure that our food was definitely organic and clean, locally sourced. We had really great recipes. And then, like I said, when I started tracking it with my blood work, it was not improving my thyroid. It was not even improving anything to do with triglycerides or any of those things, which are really important numbers. And my naturopath and I would go back and forth. I was on hypothyroid medication. I even went so far as to get off of a specific brand because it was from desiccated liver. And so again, we had these conversations, we were committed, and then I started to know that, wow, this actually isn't, it actually isn't healthy for me. And when I go back and look at my blood work then and now, and I realize, because I wouldn't say I'm a full-blown carnivore, but I definitely am meat-centric for sure. But you start to realize that when we buy into what we believe is something to do for the world, but we're sacrificing who we are and our health, where is that going to lead us? So as a family, we kind of went back and we started to introduce fish and salmon. And, I have to say, I felt better. I felt better because of doing this. And then we went into, our meat sourcing. But that's where the game changes, because I do not buy meat at a local grocery store. I won't do it. I do not buy meat at a local fast food or a fast food restaurant. I don't eat fast food anyway, but like a Walmart or a Safeway or whatever the stores are within your area. And I don't eat fast food out. If you really want to take control of your health and your well-being, stop eating out, because most of that meat that you're eating is the bottom of the barrel. And unfortunately, it's where the animals pay the heaviest price. So if you have cows loaded into a chute getting ready to be slaughtered, their body releases adrenaline and cortisol, and we eat that. They're pumped full of all kinds of antibiotics, like I said, and growth hormone. And as these animals are going through, it's an atrocity what we're doing to these animals, versus being a regenerative type of a rancher, which is where we get all of our meat. We have a local ranch here that we buy all of our meat. We buy 1 or 2 cows a year, and we split that with families or friends. Or I buy specific brands. I will link some of the brands that I buy in here for sourcing, because I know the animals have been humanely treated, and most of them can be field harvested, which means they're taken out in the field, or it's a process. They live for a certain amount of time. And yes, the end goal, which was always my argument, was, well, the animal still dies. True. But we have been meat eaters since the dawn of time. And we have to go down this path, and we have to go through it individually. And I encourage you to have this conversation with yourself and ask yourself, if you are vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, pescatarian, whatever you decide the label that you want to take on, ask yourself why. If you are doing it because you think you're supposed to, or because you think it's the trend, question that, because you can't sacrifice your health at this point. It's too important to have a strong immune system, to have a strong skeletal muscle system. It's got to be a longevity game. And protein is way too important, and bioavailable protein and solid protein sources from meat, from fish, from raw dairy. You have to look at these things. And so I just want to encourage you, and that's the reason why I wanted to share this with you, is because we went down that path. I think I've tried every different kind of meal planning and food protocol, and I just realized that over the years that I've been coaching and training people, that if I can get the message to them as to, does this make sense to you? How do you feel? What's important to you? And let's track it with blood and other different biomarkers. You start to realize that you can build your plan around who you are, not letting the world dictate what you do, or the latest Pinterest board that you see that, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that. No, as soon as we realize that we make our decisions based upon how we feel, who we are, we take better care of what we have, and we steward this world better and our bodies better, way better, than what a lot of people actually are doing when they follow these trends, because it's the next latest and greatest thing. So I want to share this journey with you on why we did that, why we were vegan and why we're recovering vegans right now. Is because of that. It's because of the fact that you have to have choices and you have to have information. And information, I mean, knowledge is super, super important. But if you don't apply it to your life, then it's kind of wasted. And so the best way to do that is to get blood work done, to get the testing done, to know what you're dealing with. Because there's a lot of people that I know that are vegan that are paying a very heavy price with their body, with their health and well-being, because it snowballs into, it's not just the physical, it's the emotional, it's biological, it's the brain functioning, it's every single thing is connected when we talk about these specific types of food choices and eating plans that you want. So look at what's important to you. And yes, your ethics and your commitment to whatever that might be out in the world that you want, of course that's important. I'm not telling you to disregard that. What I'm telling you to look at is why you're doing something. And for us, it was really an emotional thing. It was like, we loved the animals. I hated to see it. The documentaries were just completely eye-opening for so many people. And I was actually raised on an organic farm, and we had a pig farm next to us, and I know how that goes. And we used to, same thing back when I was a kid. We would buy one cow, and it would feed our family for a year. And so that's more, to me, that's more of the conversation that we need to have. It's the amount of food that humans are consuming. It's the amount of conveniences that you drive through on all these, fast foods that you're eating. And then think about what the consumption rate is. That, to me, is a bigger conversation that most people are not willing to have, because that means that you have to change your behavior. And your behavior then is a ripple effect of how you are and what you do and consume. And it goes down to your food. I mean, how many people do we know have eating disorders or unhealthy relationships with food? Or, I mean, right now in today's world, we're celebrating obesity. We're putting it on the front cover of multiple magazines. And then you see younger people who are looking at this and they're like going, oh, is this what I'm supposed to do? No, it's not. We are supposed to steward our world and our bodies and the world around us. And if that means that being vegan is something that you want to do and you know why and you're healthy, you do that. If it means being, a carnivore and you want to be more meat, eating more meat, make sure that you're doing it with the highest level of ethics, which is regenerative, which is really the true answer to sustainability. Because if you speak to any farmer that's been doing this for any amount of time, or even farmers now that are educating themselves to work with our soils that we have today, because they're all nutrient deficient, you look at, they're putting back into the environment. Well, isn't that the best thing to do? Why is that being demonized? Why is it when you have a small farm and you're raising these cattle and these cattle are eating the grain, are eating the grass, and they're grass-fed, grass-finished, and then you're rotating the animals in the pastures. If you're growing crops, you're rotating the crops. That's regenerative for our world. And if that was the focus, it'd be interesting to see where our eating plan and our nutrition plan would actually come from. Because that is rich, it's enriching our world, it's enriching our bodies. And when you think about the vegan movement versus the carnivore versus the omnivore versus, vegetarian, all these different things, a lot of them are rooted in propaganda, as we know. All of a sudden, it's the next trend. It's the next big thing on Instagram. And when you pull yourself out of that and out of the information that you're consuming, meet with a naturopath, do some work on your own, get your blood work and your biomarkers, like I said, and really sit there and think, okay, how am I doing? How's my sleep? How's my energy? How's my body composition? How's my strength? How's my functionality? How's my cognitive ability? All these things. Then you have to look at your food. And that's why I said when we chose to be vegan, I've known this all my life, this is what I've done, but in this moment in time, it's like, okay, I'm going to go down this path because I think maybe this might be better. And then depending upon the documentaries that you choose to watch or the books you read or the articles and studies that you do, you'll verify that decision one way or the other. And so the biggest thing came down to my blood work. You can't lie. It can't lie. And when I started to see, yes, my cholesterol might have been, 140, which is really low, but HDL and LDLs were off, triglycerides were off, my thyroid was still off. And I was like, okay, this is crazy because isn't this supposed to be this great, And then as we started to move past that and add different, animal proteins in, I felt a shift. I saw a shift. I personally love, I love weight training. I love having muscle on my frame. I've been doing that since I was 17. And so, I love that, like the full muscle bellies, the strength. I love the strong skeletal muscle system. And that wasn't the case when we were vegan. You look at that and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't feel as strong. And so your body's going to go through all these different adaptations of how you feed it, but then you have to go back and figure out what's best for you. That's really why I wanted to share this with you, is the fact that however you decide to eat and whatever your label of your food is, I want you to think about why you're doing this. And so we talked as a family and we started to add some meat back in, and everybody was like, okay, I actually feel better. Things are clearer in my mind. The brain fog is gone. I feel stronger in the gym. I feel stronger, lifting the weights. I feel, so we went off of that, but then we tracked it with our blood. And you guys, I'm telling you, you can't, it doesn't lie. And if you are willing to do that and take the time to do that, and in this generation right now, you have more information at your fingertips to discern through all this stuff. And yes, you're going to have the extremes. You're going to have the extremes with the guys like the Liver King. You're going to have the extremes with these athletes that are vegans. But you have to look at what works best for you. And that's really what this is all about. It's giving yourself permission to look at your body as a whole and your body chemistry and your makeup and your lifestyle and your ethics and what you believe, and going, okay, I'm going to take a step back from all of this other societal stuff, and I'm going to realize, how could I best feed my body, feed my family, take care of my world, steward that, because you can't get away from any of this. And if I can tell you right now, if propaganda is pushing something and there's a reason for it. And that's why I said government subsidies are huge in our meal plan, our foods, and what we see in the stores. You don't think, when Wendy's runs their 1 cent burger, do you really think it's 1 cent? They're getting subsidies and they're pushing this. And so learn to discern the food that you eat and where you get it from and your sourcing, and also ask questions as to why all of a sudden are we hearing about all kinds of stuff, kale? Why are we hearing about avocados now? And it's not by chance, let's just say that. So encouragement really comes down to looking at your food, looking at your body, where you're at with your journey with your health and well-being, and interjecting in there and realizing I can make different choices. And yes, you might be inspired. I'm not gonna disregard that. You might be inspired by, other kinds of, posts you see, and someone's a carnivore and they're doing 30-day carnivore, all these different things. There's all kinds of great accounts you can follow. But at the end of the day, even though you're inspired by some of this stuff, you still have to make the decisions and choices that are best for you. And that's really what I want you to do, is advocate for yourself and align everything. And that compass should be your blood work and your health and your well-being from numbers and biomarkers, because they don't lie. Track it. Track your glucose. There's great companies out there that do that. Track it, because that's the information that I'm talking about and the knowledge. But then you have to apply it. So we went through this vegan journey, and then after we decided to kind of break it and break off of it, we really started to become more focused on not necessarily like from a standpoint of, oh, this is better than that. It was really about, I feel better with, 120 grams of protein a day, and that they are from, bison, fish, eggs, and meat. Or I feel better on this particular, and then integrating that into our workouts and our daily lifestyles, because we have a very active lifestyle as family. And my daughters and my husband and I, and then my daughter's husband. So you get to a place of realizing that, we're sold these plans. We're told what to do, and then we jump onto that. And if you follow me at all on Instagram, I post a lot about different products and information and nutrition, and links and things that I use only from a place of I want you to think about it. Think about where you get your food, what your food sourcing is, what's the influences on the companies that you are supporting. And also, what does that do? Because everyone starts to think about the outside going inward. I want you to think inside out. I mean, it's going to show on your skin, in your hair, your nails, your teeth. I mean, everything. Your food affects every single thing. And so, like I said, for us, I took one look at my blood work after a few years of doing this. And also, like I said, my hair, wasn't as healthy. My gum tissue, you name it. And so, but it takes a time for that to catch up, right? So when you start it, you feel good about it. You kind of feel like you're part of the community and you're doing the right thing, and you're virtuous in making these decisions and saving all these animals, until you actually look into it and you realize that, is it really? Is it really? Because if you look at how almond milk is done and how many animals and field mice and in these fields and in a plant-based type of a nutrition, there's a heavy price there too for animals. It doesn't matter. You can't get away from it. So, if we take one cow a year and that feeds my family for about 6 months, I think maybe we have like one cow for a year would probably feed my family. We split it with families and friends. But if you think about that, that's one animal that's feeding an entire family. Versus if I'm going to go plant-based, how many animals have died in the manufacturing of my products that I use as plant-based? If you look at, the lab-grown meat, by the way, that is a story in and of itself, because the cells that are taken from the animals to make lab-grown meat, you might want to look into that, because it's not what you think it is, because they have to have that animal cell in order to grow the lab-grown meat. And so where that comes from. And I'm going to do another podcast on this with some other great information on this, because you have to know, the veil has to be lifted. Otherwise, you don't know what you don't know. So you're making these decisions blindly and you're not fully informed. So how can you make an informed decision, right? So you got to understand, this stuff is being pushed and propagandized because of, and you fill in the blank. So if we went back to, it's funny, I talk about this with my clients all the time. In order for us to actually be more progressive and move forward, we're going to have to be more conservative in our choices. And that is not a political statement. That is how we actually make our decisions and choices from what's the consequence? What does it affect? What does it actually impact? And we're not doing that. Because we've allowed to be led into these different types of trends. And so I'm going to leave this right here. I'm going to put some links in this particular podcast, and I'm going to do another one on this, and we're going to dive into a lot of this stuff, because I really want you to think about, if you choose to do any kind of a lifestyle of nutrition or health and well-being, how you do it and why you do it should be really important to you, because that's going to be your commitment to it. But you've got to be informed. I mean, if you are on the fence about vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, carnivore, whatever it is, just make sure that you actually know what it's about and what the impact is. And it might be interesting for you to do that. And like I said, I'm more concerned of the amount of consumption that Americans do, the amount of gluttony that is done in the food industry, the amount of waste in the food industry, the amount of fake food and frankenfood and lies in the food industry. You really don't know unless you start to look. And I invite you to do that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the TLM Nation podcast. I hope you've learned something new and useful. I hope you're willing to ask questions and to seek truth, and be bold in that. Please subscribe, drop us 5 stars and a great review, and we'll see you next time.